Hello and welcome to part 3 of the blog post series on process mining and cost accounting. So in this blog post we will have a quick look at what we did in the first and second part, and then we will have a deep dive into process mining and cost accounting and how we can automate this process. And then of course at the end we close with a short summary and outlook. And because this might take longer, maybe grab a drink or something to eat. But now let's get started with a short review of part 1 and 2. So what did we do? Well, in the first part we had a look at task mining, where we used Power Automate Desktop to make recordings of what we did in a system. We were editing the recording and then we started to analyze our processes to identify things that we can automate. And of course that's a continuous circle where we try to find the potentials to automate things. Then in the second part we had a look at this process mining, and what we did was, we collected data. In our case, we used electronic reporting from Dynamics 365, but you can use other data sources. We were transforming the data, mapped them, analyzed them, and then we also had a look at the MineIt desktop app, which gives us a deeper insight and additional analysis purposes or functionalities that we do not have available in Power Automate. And we did that first for analyzing Power Automate flows. And then second, we analyzed data from a system of records. And in our case, we used Dynamics 365 Finance, basically where we used electronic reporting data that we exported. Okay, now today we want to build upon the things that we did before. And I would like to start with cost accounting first. And the graphic that I'm using in the following comes from an old blog post that I published a couple of years ago. And what it shows you here is, on the left hand side, a financial accounting system. So finance basically, with the chart of accounts. Then here in the middle we have a classical cost accounting system that consists of cost type accounting. And in the cost type accounting you make a separation between direct costs and indirect costs. The direct costs, they can then be assigned to a primary cost center. So the second step in a classical cost accounting system is cost center accounting, and direct costs can directly go to primary cost centers. Secondary or indirect costs, fixed costs, they cannot be directly assigned to primary cost centers. But what we can do is, we can calculate percentages. So for example, I can say, my indirect costs are 5,000, my direct costs are 50,000, so I know I have to add 10% on top of my direct costs. And then I can do things like item cost calculations, where I have material costs, labor costs, and so on. And then I add on top 10% to cover the indirect costs. Or I can do something like absorption costing, where I put these costs into my profit and loss statement. Or finally, I can do direct costing, where I make a separation of the cost and try to split it in business units, in product groups, in projects, whatever you have, to analyze your costs. And now what I want to do is, I want to kind of allocate these indirect costs to different departments, business units, whatever we have. But the question is, how can we do that? And how can we do that with process mining? And to answer this question, let's first have a look at the basic idea. So the idea is the following. We have a cost center, a finance cost center, for example, where the salary of the people that execute a process are posted. So for example, finance department post the cost of an accounts payable clerk that records vendor invoices. And then if we have data about the vendor invoices, we can do cost allocations to projects, profit centers, departments, whatever we have. And of course, the customer, they also give us money for our services that we offer, so that at the end of the day, we can have a look at the overall profitability, let's say, of a project. So that's the basic idea of this allocation. And then the question is, what tools do we have available? And well, I found 3 tools here. First, we can use cost allocations or ledger allocation rules in Dynamics. We can use project time recordings, and finally ledger journals. If you do not know how to use ledger allocation rules and project time recordings for cost allocations, then have a look at my previous posts where I illustrated this in more detail. But in general, the concept or the idea is the same. So we have a frequency of the transaction. So maybe record 50 invoices. Then we have an average duration, maybe 10 minutes per invoice. We can attach a price in order to get the amount to allocate. Now the question is, okay, how does this go along with process mining? Well, the frequency and the average duration, this is something we can read from the process advisor. So we see here average duration, we see here a case count. The price can be, for example, an average salary or a market price for similar services that you buy. And then we can do the allocation. But the question is, hey, here we are in Power BI or in Process Advisor. How can we get this data into finance and operations to make our cost allocation? And well, the answer is simple. So we start here with the Process Advisor, and then if you click here on Edit, you get the possibility to add these results into a Power BI workspace. If you want to know details, then have a look at this post here from Microsoft Learn. It's pretty easy to realize. And once you have done that, then you can go to Power BI and you see a dataset and your report. Once you have that, you can then make use of a flow. But how to extract the data? That's a question. And that's something I want to show you next. So you go into the Power BI workspace, into the dataset. And then on the right hand side, you see your tables. And in the tables, you have measures. And what I used was the frequency and the average duration value. So you just click on these things. And what you get is basically here a preview. But then next to it, there is a button called Show Query. And that's exactly the string that you need in Flow to extract the data. So you basically copy this to your clipboard. You go and create a flow. I trigger this manually here. And then you just paste this query text. That's very simple. So here on top, you can connect your data set. That's perfect. And then you get the data. But there's a problem. And the problem is the following. This data set, string or connection, this changes each and every time you do an update or a new analysis of your data. So let's say you analyze your process data for December. In January, you analyze the data again, you do a refresh. And then this string here changes and breaks the flow. And that's something I want to show you first before we go deeper into the solution, how we can fix this. So let's have a look into my system and see what's the problem. Okay, so I'm here in Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations. And what we did the last time was we created an electronic report to extract data from our workflow to record vendor invoices. I will not dig into details here, but this was this report, and then we just run the report and imported the data into our Process Advisor. Okay, so this time I changed it a bit. What I did was I added an output destination. So when I run this report, I say, okay, save the data on SharePoint. And here on top I have a filter. Maybe let's change that a bit. Yeah. So that we analyze the data for the last couple of days. Yeah. Before I run this one, I want to show you how the Process Advisor looks currently. Yeah. So let's go into that. And that's the result of my last analysis. Yeah. I can see here I was analyzing 4 cases. Yeah. So 4 invoices that were recorded in the last days. I can see here average duration. I can see here total duration and analyze the data as I want. Yeah. And now to automate the whole thing, what I will do is I will just run this electronic report, this export of the data, on a regular basis. How can I realize that? Well, first thing is define an electronic reporting output destination. And if you do not know how this can be defined, have a look at my previous blog post and then define a recurrence. So for example, run it automatically every week or every month or whatever period you are interested in. So I'm running this now. And what it does, it updates an Excel document that I have here on SharePoint. So if I refresh it, then I see the data. But now SharePoint is not the thing that I need for the Process Advisor. Why? Well, if we go back here into Process Advisor, then I have a test here. And if you remember, then the first thing is to select your data source. And what I did is I used an Excel workbook. And here you see that you can browse OneDrive. So what I need is basically, I need to shift the data from my electronic report that is on SharePoint to OneDrive. And then I can come here into this and grab the file and then get an automatic update. I'm not doing that here because I have already done it. So how can you realize that? How do you get the data from SharePoint to OneDrive? Well, pretty simple. You just use here a flow. And the flow that I used works as follows. It basically says, okay, if something changes, so for example, the version of my file is changed, get the file content and update the file, the Excel document that I have on OneDrive. So let's see if this was already running. So this was the last run. So if we go on here, OneDrive, then we should see the data is updated. So I probably have more cases inside. Let's download that and have a quick look to see what's inside. And if I enable that, then you can see the instance ID. And now you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different cases. 5 different invoice processes that I want to analyze. Okay, so now the data is ready. I can go to Process Advisor. And what I established is this one here. LRA demo blog post number 3. Where I already have the connection to this OneDrive Excel file. The last time I executed this transaction, it had 4 cases. And now let's say, okay, we are in the new months. I have the refreshed data. And now I want to analyze the process again to see what has changed, maybe over the last months. So I'm refreshing that. And this takes a while. I hope not too long. But if you find it too slow, just fast forward the video. What I want to show you is basically that we have now different data, different number of cases that we can analyze. And the key here is to get this data into Power BI, and then from Power BI with the help of a flow to Dynamics. But let's quickly wait until this finishes here, so that we can have a look at the data that we want to analyze. So let's give it a second or two. Yeah, and the key is of course the connection to OneDrive and the refreshed file content that I realized here with the help of Power Automate. Okay, and now data should be ready. Yeah, so you see the number of cases has changed. Also the duration has probably changed, the number of things that we want to analyze. And now the next step would be to bring this data to Flow. And this is a one-time setup, so you do not have to do it all the time. That's what I already did before. So I said, okay, this report is linked here to this workspace, and that's the report name. So if we go to Power BI, then I have here my workspaces, this one here. I can see there is, where is it? Here, LAE blog post number 3. I can see the data set, and somewhere there's also a report for that. So if I click on that, then you see following. On the right hand side you see the tables. So what you can do is you can go into that. You can say I want to see the case frequency. I want to select, where is it, average duration value. I think that's it. As not the display. I think it should be this one, yeah. And thereby you grab the data from here, so from the analytics section. So it's actually exactly the same. So 17.98 minutes, that's this, and that case frequency. And now what I did is I just used this show query, copied this to my clipboard, and then I created a second flow. And the second flow is this one here. And it's also simple. So I said, okay, manually trigger this flow and then run a query against the dataset. That's very easy. Here you see the query text, but then you see here the dataset. And the dataset is the problem. Why is the problem? Because here this string breaks. And let me select that. The reason for that is this string here at the end, this number, this changes every time you click on this button here, where you reanalyze the data. So you can also see this from Power BI. So if you go back and then see the settings, if you would do a new analysis, then the string here changes, and this flow connection breaks. And what happens is the following. So if we go back, your flow fails. And that's what's happening all the time to me when I run this report and it says, okay, I cannot find this data. Why? Of course, I mean, if this update refreshes and publishes the report again, then the string changes and then you are stuck. And how we can overcome this issue, that's something I want to show you first in my PowerPoint and then also of course in my system. But let's go first back to the PowerPoint. Okay, so that's a slide that shows our problem, that the dataset ID changes once we do a new analysis of the data. And to overcome this, my friend Tommy, so special thanks here, sent me a link to this Learn site, where you can get datasets in a group with this HTTP connector. So what does it do? Well, you need an HTTP connector in your flow, and then you need this group ID, and this group ID is just from your Power BI workspace, this ID here. And this string here is then put into an HTTP connector. That's the first thing. The second thing is, of course, you cannot just get the dataset information just like that, but there are some security and access restrictions. So you need to make a special setup. And what you need to set up is described in this blog post here. We will have a look at this in a minute, but in a nutshell, it's a couple of steps that you need to execute. And that's what I want to show you next, how this can be done so that you can directly extract the data from Power BI, your dataset. So let's have a look. Okay, so I want to start here with the blog post from Wahid and go through these things because I do not want to show you my secrets and the passwords that I used. But if you follow this post, then you can easily see what's going on. So the first thing is you register your Azure application, and I use the second string here. Then you have to define a name, a display name basically, and say, okay, where do you want to have the API access? And then once this is done, you get here an application ID and a secret. That's something you have to save and store, because then you go into Azure where you have to do an app registration. That's here, this display name that you defined. And then you have to define or give this permission to this Power BI service, grant the admin access, and then you can basically use that. The other thing, if you want to make use of that, you have to go into Power BI, into the settings, and enable this parameter. In my case, I said, okay, it's for the entire organization because I have a demo system where I'm the only user. But if you want to use it in a live environment, you probably want to limit the access. And then of course, here you have to give this Power BI app access to your workspace so that they can grab the data. And then once you have done that, you need this authentication method and the tenant, audience, client ID. That's all described here and can be taken from Azure. So if you scroll down here, you will see where to find this information. You just copy paste, and then you are ready to go. That's also shown here, but in my case, I have done that with a new flow that I called flexible. So if we look into that, then I use the same connector, run a query against the dataset. That's the same. But the dataset is now not a fixed string, but it uses this variable. And how did I get this variable? Well, I used here this connector that connects to my datasets. Then I pass a JSON, I initialize a variable, I filter, I do a filter. And how can I filter the correct dataset? Well, it's easy. Here, if you go to Power BI, I have a couple of datasets. But the one I'm interested in here is this one, LRE demo blog post 3. And that's the only one that starts with this name. So I can be sure that I grab the correct dataset. Once I have that, I take the variable here and put the ID. And this ID is then used here to get the data. And then of course, once you have the frequency and the average duration, then I split it into a body, I compose or hold the frequency. That's a simple conversion here. I take the duration and then I multiply that. So I take frequency times duration gives this value. And then I can create here a journal header and journal lines. And for the journal lines, the critical thing is here. First, that you have accounts that you use for this allocation. And I created here some statistical accounts. So we debit here department 23 for operations and we credit finance department. And the amount is just this frequency times duration. And I said, okay, I have a price of $250. That's all. So if we run this flow, then we get a new general journal. So let's see. So we have two here. So let's run this one. And this can be also automated. And you can run this, for example, once a month or once a week, whatever you want to analyze. And what this does is it basically takes the data here from your datasets. It runs the query extracts all and then creates a journal. So once this is through, we should see a new journal created. That's it. If we go into the lines, then you see here the department that gets the cost. And here you see the department that gets kind of money as a compensation for the work done. What I have also done is here I put into the quantity field, I put the time that is needed. And the time is just here from this one here. It's 89.9. Sorry here. Yeah, it's this one. And times 250 gives this amount, which is then our allocation. So I'm not going to post it, but I show you that I can run the simulation. And once you have posted this transaction, you can then go into your financial reports and then have a look at this kind of allocation. And I did that before. So for December, here I see department 23, here's department 24. And here at the bottom I can see, okay, that's a charge for department 23 and department 24. That's the department where I have my financial people working on and where I record their salaries. They get a credit. So that allows me to analyze basically the fixed cost and how much is possibly left on the department. So let's say you have salaries of 10,000 and have here the credit note of 5,000, then 5,000 remains as the cost on this department. And then you can say, okay, hey, what's going on? Do we need to automate things again, or why are my people not that busy? But these are things that go beyond this process here. Okay, so in a nutshell, again, if we start and do a quick summary, we started here with electronic reporting to export the information from our workflows. We put them on SharePoint, and then from SharePoint to OneDrive, because we can connect the Process Advisor to a OneDrive file. In the Process Advisor, we did an update on this so that we can analyze the very latest data. And once you do the update, the dataset string, the dataset ID changes. And to overcome this issue of the dataset string change, we use this connector to get the correct query and then the correct journals and allocations. Okay, so that's it, what I wanted to show you. Let's now go back to my PowerPoint for some closing remarks and notes. Okay, so that's here the Power Automate flow that I used. And basically the first steps, they were used to get the data from the Power BI dataset. And then the second number of tasks, they were used to convert the data and then create the journal ledger journals. And I used here ledger journals, but you can use also, as I mentioned before, ledger allocation rules. You can use cost accounting, you can use time recordings, whatever you prefer. The key thing is here that we do an allocation, in this case from our salary admin department. There's a finance here, and then the charge is posted against our operations department. And here's a summary of the financial statements that you can run to analyze it in more detail. Of course, we already did the demo, so let's close with a short summary. Here are the different steps again. So from left to right, we export and analyze the data with the help of electronic reporting, save it to a Power BI workspace, use Power Automate to grab the data from Power BI, from the workspace, from the data set, and then use here different ways how we can allocate that in order to analyze the data then in financial statements. Here are the different tools that I used. And then if you are analyzing a process like this, so let's say you want to analyze things that are going on in finance and accounting department, then people typically don't only record invoices. So there's more than a single process. Yeah? So I have here a task 1, the vendor invoice recording, that I analyzed with the help of this process that I just showed you. But people typically do other things. So for example, create collection letters, reconcile customer payments. Maybe they do some tasks outside the system where you do not have recordings. Yeah? But for everything that is highlighted in yellow color here, where you can get a timestamp and information on the process that's going on, you can gain insights into your indirect or fixed cost areas and then use allocations that are more precise than just using a lump sum allocation. Why? Because they are really based on actual data. That's the advantage that I see here. So here, the most important thing or advantages that I see is first, there's no time recording required. We get the times from Process Advisor, and there's also not a problem with the Labor Council. Why? Because we don't use data that allow us to see the individual resource. So by using this kind of technique, you can implement an activity-based costing approach, which is more precise than any kind of lump sum allocation that you might have done in the past. Okay, but that's it for today, what I wanted to show you. I hope you enjoyed it and learned a bit what to do with process mining and how to establish the connection to cost accounting. So thanks again for listening and watching, and then looking forward to seeing you in the next blog post.